Hello, this is Gary from Texas on 9A, just north of Beaumont. And today I'm here to talk to you if you're a beginning farmer or if you're a beginning gardener that wants to start growing some stuff in containers. You might not have ever grew anything before. Just some tips, some things to look at. You know, it's this time of the season, you start getting seed catalogs in, you say, hey, I want to grow some things. And here's 7 things that you want to consider. The first off, is do you want to grow food in a container, or do you just like the idea of growing food in a container? And by that, back when I was in either junior, senior in high school, I bought a guitar. And I always liked the idea of playing the guitar, because your guitar you can take anywhere you want to go. If you want to go out on a camp out or whatever, you can bring a guitar. Everybody, even if you're in a church setting or auditorium, you bring out a guitar, everybody just kind of relaxes, and you know, where a piano is more rigid. So I always liked that idea of playing the guitar. Now, I bought that guitar, and I had that guitar for over 30 years. Lost it in the flood. The house flooded during Hurricane Harvey. And I remember the first couple of times that I practiced with that guitar. The reason I remember the first couple of times I practiced that guitar, had it for over 30 years, that's the only time I ever practiced. You know, I had it for 30 years. I still miss the guitar, but I was never going to learn to play that guitar. I liked the idea of doing it, but I really wasn't committed to actually doing it. So when you get into gardening, you may say, you know, I like that idea of growing my own food. I can do this, I can do that. It'll be clean food. I know what I'm putting in it. It may be cheaper, but do you enjoy doing it? You know, do you really want to try to do it? And I'm not saying you have to be, you know, super intelligent or have a green thumb or any of that stuff, but you have to be committed that you got to learn how to do it, and you also have to be able to learn to fail. What got me about that guitar is I practiced for an hour, still couldn't play a song. I wasn't willing to fail at doing that. So, and that's the only one of the 7 that's kind of philosophical. But just make sure, hey, I really want to do it. So don't sit there and think I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money doing this and then later, you know, regret it. Start out small. Don't get real big. See if you really enjoy doing it or not. Okay, number 2. You got to get the right container size for the plant that you're planting. I was talking to a nurse at a hospital, and she was talking about, you know, she had a pepper plant. And she said, I just can't get my pepper plants to grow. It just gets too hot, and they die on me. And I said, well, you know, what size containers do you have? Well, I don't. And I said, for a pepper plant, you have one plant, you need a 5-gallon bucket. This size right here. You know, this is a 5-gallon bucket. This comes from it's lumberyard. This here is a Thai pepper. That's how much it takes in the summertime. If you try to put 2 peppers or 3 peppers in it, or try to go to a small, you know, you try to go this size, what's going to happen? It'll grow for a while. It'll grow about this tall, and then it gets hot, and it doesn't have enough root system in it, or doesn't have enough water in this pot to be able to support it to go for 24 hours. You have to have enough water to supply that plant with at least 24 hours, because you're not going to water more than once a day. You know, unless you're just really into this stuff. You know, I one time had a deal saying, well, you need to water, you need to have a really well-draining potting mix, and you may have to water 2 or 3 times a day. That's not doable, okay? And but some people may do that. I think it's crazy trying to do that. Now, the other thing people want to do is they want to plant a tomato plant, okay? This here's a tomato plant. Now, this here's a dwarf tomato plant. A dwarf tomato plant, and it'll say dwarf on it. You can put them in a 5-gallon bucket. This thing's going to start flowering here pretty soon. It's going to get about this tall. 5-gallon bucket is plenty big for it. But if you have just a regular celebrity, better boy, you know, one of your heirloom tomatoes, you know what size you need for that? For one plant? Over here. This size right here. Okay? And this size is the size that you'll need. You have to water it probably every day during the heat of the summer. You just need that, because that tomato plant's going to get, you know, taller than me, potentially. So, right size plant for the right size container, right size container for right size plant. Now let's go up over here. I just walk on up over here. let's say you want to grow some greens, some green stuff. A 5-gallon bucket doesn't work right because you're going to put the greens in here. You just got this small area, really deep bucket. That doesn't make a good container for lettuce and things. You could do it, but it's not the best. What's best is the old mud buckets that they sell at stores and stuff, at the lumber yards. Not very deep. You know, it's maybe 4 to 5 inches deep, but you don't need really deep because lettuces don't have a deep root system. What you want there is a wide ones, because these plants here can get big and they get wide, and I can get several plants. I've got 12 plants in here, or 12 sets. There are more plants than that. Now, you might be able to say, well, I want to use fabric pots. This here fabric pot, it would do maybe a couple of peppers, I guess 3 peppers probably. It might do a tomato plant. It's going to be pushing it, but you can probably get a tomato plant out of it. But that's one way of looking at it. Now you can also go with bigger containers. Okay, we're going to go up over here and I'll show you those. Okay, over here we've got a water trough. And this water trough, it leaks, so we put some hose in it for it to drain. This is deep, it's wide. You can plant anything you want in here. You can plant broccoli, lettuce plants, carrots. That's a good one overall. And it's heavy, so if you're on a patio or on a balcony, it might be too heavy for it. But that's a good one. It gives you a lot of choices. I'd say you could probably put two. I just put 1 tomato plant in it, but you could put 2 in it of regular sized tomatoes. Up over here is the bigger container that they use for mixing. I think it's used for mixing the mortar and stuff. But you know, it's a little bit deeper. You can push it and plant carrots in it, and again, it's wide. Right now we've got oregano growing over here, and it's starting to take back. It did have this whole thing taken over, and it died back because somebody forgot to water it, my cameraman. But it's growing in here. However, if you're looking at some of your herbs, you know, this right here, herbs growing just fine in that little pot. That pot's not very big. Of course, one reason is because the pot's growing into the ground. Okay, that happens sometimes too. But you know, now this here, lemongrass, it's in this size pot. That's not a good deal because you want to have a deeper pot and it can dry out too fast. Now we kept it alive. The reason it's like this is because of frost. But I wouldn't put a tomato plant or even a pepper plant in this container because you want it, your pepper plants are deeper and your tomato plants are deeper rooted, so you want a deeper plant for that. Okay, the next thing we're going to be talking about, because we kind of got, that's kind of different size pots. I mean, this pot here, it's good for peppers. I wouldn't put a tomato plant in it. I think that's pushing it for a big tomato plant, because what happened, you get about this tall, you get some tomatoes on it, and then all of a sudden it starts struggling. So, but anyway, next thing we're going to talk about is potting mix, and we'll get back to it in just a second. The next thing you're going to look at is your potting mix, okay? If you go to the store and you buy it and you're going to put something in containers, buy potting mix, not potting soil, because potting soil may have native soil in it. It doesn't drain well. It doesn't work good in containers. Even though it says potting soil, it's not good to be putting in these pots because you just don't get good drainage out of it. Now, if you say I can't afford it and you're still going to do a lot of pots, here's a cheap and easy way to make your own. You can buy this here, perlite, about $30 for this bag here. This here is your peat moss. It's going to run you about $15 to $20. It's like it's $20 now, it's went up. And this here's pine bark mulch. It runs about $3 for this big bag. All right, that's a 2 cubic foot bag. A 2 cubic foot bag of potting mix is going to cost you a lot more than that. And the way you mix it, you go by volume. It's 5 parts of this pine bark mulch, and you want to get the finer pine bark mulch. You know, it looks like this. It does have those big chunks in it. You know, they got some that's got like 1-inch chunks or whatever. Sometimes they'll call it soil conditioner or whatever, but you want smaller chunks. All right, and then you take 5 parts of that by volume, 1 part of your perlite, and 1 part of your peat moss. Now, this stuff here is kind of degraded somewhat, so I may skip out on the peat moss and just go 1 part perlite, 6 parts of this, and this is what you come up with. It's this type of mix here. That works really well. Gives good drainage. The roots are able to breathe in it, and it works nice. It's a cheaper way of doing it. But don't cheap out on your potting mix, okay? Don't go up to the bag, go to the store and say, hey, this stuff's really cheap. This potting soil is really cheap. I'll buy it, because it's going to have mainly sand in it, some of that nature, and it's just not going to, your plants just aren't going to do as well. They might survive, but they're not going to thrive, okay? Number 4, in Texas anyway, okay? Planting dates are very, very important. A lot of times you can go to your AgriLife Service Center and Extension Service, and they may have a guide that tells you what dates you can plant them in. They're very important because in Texas we have really basically 2 seasons, 3 if you want to count winter, but we have a spring season and we have a fall season to plant gardens, to plant vegetables in. Nothing's going to survive our summers. July and August is going to wipe everything out. So what people would tend to do is they'll want to plant tomatoes, and if you're going to plant tomatoes, you want to start your transplants around, from my area, zone 9A, start it somewhere around Martin Luther King's Day, middle of January, and I'll plant the seeds in. They'll be ready about Valentine's Day, and I'll look at the forecast and say, can I plant them now? And get them in the ground, and get them in the ground, get them in the containers, and I might want to pull them in or out if I have to, because you want to get an early start. Now you got to watch out for freezes, you got to watch out for frost, but you want an early start because summer's coming. And one mistake I see a lot of people when they first start, or they come from another area come down here in Texas, is they'll look at that and they'll say, hey, I got a long growing season, and they'll plant them in April, May. You don't have a chance, because July's coming, and once July comes, it's going to wipe everything out. Your tomatoes aren't going to ripen as quickly. You're going to get diseases. You're going to get stuff start splitting if we get rain. It's just not doable. Your plants usually will not survive. Your beans, they may bloom, but they're not going to set the blooms. The pollination goes down really bad during the hot summer. So planting dates are correct. Get your planting dates and find out about it, okay? And then now we're going to go up to number 5. Okay, before I go to number 5, after you got to thinking about it, I talked a lot about tomatoes, but the opposite can be true too. Peppers, you do not want to plant at the same time as tomatoes, because peppers need warmer temperatures. If they ever get temperatures below 40 degrees, they would tend to stun out on you, and it will affect your harvest for the rest of the year. Okra, you want to plant it in April and May, all right? Some of the other, like your southern peas, your cowpeas, they like the warmer temperatures, don't like the cooler weather. So sometimes people plant corn too early, and inhibit germination. So you just got to get the right timing on your containers. Now you can grow container corn, but it's complicated. You got to do a lot of self-pollination and stuff. You got to help pollinate it. But number 5, you got to plant the correct variety, and not only variety. Certain plants just don't do well down here. They're very complicated. Brussels sprouts is notorious for people down here in the south saying, I can't get my Brussels sprouts to grow. Garlic, hard to get garlic to grow. There is a elephant garlic that does well around here. It's not technically a true garlic, but it is treated like a garlic, so it can, you can use it. But get the correct variety. There's certain varieties of tomatoes that just don't do good down here. Okay, some of your old heirlooms that people talk about, they're not going to do as well. If you're going to be growing tomatoes in a 5-gallon bucket, you want to get the dwarf type tomatoes, which is a special type of tomatoes you get to grow on your own probably. I've never seen them in the nurseries before. They're getting more popular. There's a micro tomato that's a really small one that will grow in that little bucket that I showed earlier. But without growing a bucket smaller than these here, it's a micro, or a micro tomato. Get the right variety. You're probably not going to be wanting to grow, if you grow beans, you want to grow the bush type beans. You don't want to grow the other, the pole beans. but a lot of it is certain, even like pepper plants. Bell peppers are hard to grow down here, where banana peppers do really well. Your sweet banana peppers they'll produce pretty much all summer. Your bell peppers, they're going to produce a crop in the spring. If you can keep them alive through the summer, they'll put on another small crop in the fall. They're not going to produce any in the summertime. It's just too hot for them. So again, kind of pay attention, talk to some people, find out what varieties do well in your area. You know, even some of the broccolis, they say certain broccolis will do well in one part of the country, not well in another part of the country. Now, Green Magic broccoli tends to do well all over. So just recognize that just because you might have grown, or you've heard people growing fruit in one part of the country, does not necessarily mean it's going to do well down here. So, you know, kind of find out if there's a certain variety that does really well in your area. Number 6, fertility. Okay, now people argue with me on this. I don't always take the popular stance. If I'm going to be, you know, when you mix up this mix, it's heavy. This mix here doesn't have any fertility in it. All right, you put the mix that I had down there. Now, sometimes I'll say on the potting mix that they've got enough fertility in it for 6 to 9 months. I doubt it, because one of the things that's in it is going to be nitrogen. That nitrogen can break down. Did you get a new bag this year or an old bag? If you got an old bag, it's probably not going to have any in it. Plus, every time you water, you're going to tend to flush this stuff out. So you're going to have to add fertility. As one time, one person, elder person, was talking about gardening, and we asked if he had, you know, fertilized. I gave him a tomato, put it in a container. He said, "Well, did you fertilize?" He said, "Well, no." And the dear, sweet old lady or elderly lady looked at him and said, "You've got to eat. It's got to eat. You know, if you want to grow, you've got to eat. You got to, if you want that plant to grow, you got to feed it too, just like you do anything es." And now you can go organic or you can go synthetic. The conventional fertilizers, I go with conventional fertilizers. Miracle Grow, Osmocote's good. The Dynagrow Foliage Pro is probably one of the better ones. You know, it's a liquid fertilizer that you can put out on it. I believe it's liquid. They might have I believe it's a liquid fertilizer. But just don't overdo it. Don't put too much fertilizer, because you know, your organics, you have to put a lot more in it because they're not as potent. You know, it's almost like, you know, if you use synthetics, it's almost like taking medicine, where if you're using organics, it's like you're eating food. You know, if you need to get vitamins, you take one little pill, it'll give you all the vitamins you need. But if you're going to eat an orange to get the same amount of vitamins, you're going to eat a lot of oranges. So just be careful. Always remember, you can add more fertility, you can add more fertilizer to it. You can't take it out very easy. Nitrogen is going to be one that gets away from you. The other thing in this container, if you're trying to go organic, is there's a lot of different stuff. You have calcium, boron, manganese, all these different stuff, and it's hard to get that in the right proportions if you're going with organics. Some people make organics work, but if you're starting out, don't be scared to use synthetics, all right? And the last thing I want to talk about is watering. Now, I one time had a person that I gave a plant to, and it died, and I said, "Well, what happened? Why did it die?" Because I knew it was a healthy plant. Mine had survived. She said, "Well, I think it had to do with watering. I either watered it too much or not enough. But I think it's one or the other." And I'm going, that's okay. That's like, okay, I had a dog and it died. I either fed it too much or not enough. I'm not sure which. And you got to figure that out. Now, when I picked this bucket up, this sucker was heavy. Now, what does that tell me? That tells me there's a lot of water in this bucket. So if I was going to plant, if I had something growing in this bucket and it was that heavy, I wouldn't water it because it's heavy. Now, if I walked up to it and it picked up, it's just really light, not much water in it. We need to water it. Not really hard, especially if you're in these plastic buckets. Just walk up beside it. That's heavy. I don't need to water it today. Or if you walk up to it and it's really light. Sometimes with these bigger plants where I got fruit trees growing in, if they blow over, I know I'm going to need to water it because the plant's light, it blows over. So I got to water it to keep it from blowing over. Water is heavy. And if you're using your good potting mixes, the potting mix is going to be light. So once you start figuring out, you know, once you put water in it and water it, you know it's watered in good, lift up the bucket, see how heavy it is. And when it gets about half that weight, you need to water again. Now some people say they stick their finger in and do all that stuff, but to me it's easier just to pick up the bucket and see. Again, if you're going to start out with containers, get you 4 or 5 containers, plant what you like, plant what you like to eat, and it's a fun hobby to have. But you know, don't go too overboard with it. And don't, you know, I hear a lot of people say, well, he's got a green thumb or she's got a green thumb. Folks, we all mess up. You know, I've got plants that die out here. I've got plants that don't make it out here. I've got a fig tree over there that died. I don't know why, but it just died. Not really my fault, because I got a bunch of other fig trees that didn't die. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's our fault. Sometimes things just die. So don't sit there and think, hey, I planted a tomato plant and it died. It never produced any fruit. Well, it might not have been your fault. You might have got a bad, you know, it might have got a disease you didn't know about. I had a plant this year growing in the garden. It got a disease and it grew up, and it all of a sudden started to have one of the wilting diseases. I tore it out, and luckily it didn't affect any of the other plants around me. So you're going to have some failures, but don't let that discourage you. You know, don't let that failure discourage you. Try to figure out what you did wrong. Find somebody local is best to find out, you know, and you can send me a picture. You know, I got the email. Send me a picture, and I look at the plant and say, hey, here's what I think might have happened. The gardening community is usually very friendly. They're very outgoing. They're wanting to help you, because we all want people to get involved in our hobby, because we enjoy it. And you know, it's not like sometimes in baking, you know, you bake something for the church and somebody asks, well, give me your recipe. And the old timers, they give you the recipe, but they leave something out because they didn't want you to cook as good as they did. Most gardeners don't care. If I'm growing food and my neighbor's more successful than I am, that's fine. They can share some of their produce with me, and vice versa. But anyway, before I start rambling too much more, it's a fun hobby to have. If you do it, don't spend a whole lot of money starting out. I mean, I even put on one of my videos, if you need some tomato seeds, I'd send you some tomato seeds, so it wouldn't cost you, wouldn't cost you any money if you want to start trying to grow your own tomatoes. People do that, you know, especially if it doesn't cost much in postage, you know, because we have extra seed. We get addicted to buying seeds. So reach out to people. They're willing to help you, and you know, good luck with your garden. Thank you.